Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. My name is Janey, aka Janey of Canada, and on this channel we'll talk about everything life as a professional immigrant to Canada. So studying, living, thriving, the whole gamut. So if you're new, where have you been? And if you're returning, subscribing, what's up? I miss you. If you're new, do the needful, subscribe. That's the button right there or right here, who knows. I'm super excited today. Welcome again to the channel. Reasons to subscribe, you know. Anyways, we'll talk about that later. Today's video is very exciting because I mean, I've talked about this in other videos where I'm like, oh, the Toronto housing market, or like in Canada, like housing is generally crazy, like it's very expensive, there's not enough housing supply. You've heard me like do all the rants. If you haven't, check out one of these two videos. Anyways, but today's video, we have someone who has bought in this Canada, you and I, or maybe you're not here, but you're going to be here soon, have been in, someone who has actually bought three, not one, not two, three houses in Canada. And as you know, I'm all about like sharing the good tea, putting you on plug, and that's what we're going to be doing in this video today. So I'm just here to ask my friend, like, how did you do all of this before you were 26? Because I barely even have a cardboard box. No, like, anyways, without further ado, let's welcome Juju. He's going to appear like, boom. Hi, Juju.
What's up, Janey? What's up? What's up, everybody? I'm excited to be here.
Okay, guys, like, in real life, we're not this chill. Like, we're probably just jumping on each other. But Julian is my friend, and like, once
I have to tame it down a little bit for the channel, you know. Show my good side. Show my good side.
Exactly. we don't want no negative stereotypes here.
Exactly.
All of it. Anyway, so Julian and I were talking one day, and I, to my best of my knowledge, I thought this man had two houses, and he just goes, "Yo, Junior, just come to another." And I'm like, "Whoa, how?" So I thought, honestly, because like I'm thinking about one day getting a house, and I know a bunch of my friends have talked about getting houses, but like, tell us about the process. Like, maybe let me ask you direct questions. How old are you, first of all?
I'm right now 26 years old.
He's 26 and he has three houses. Okay, no, sorry, I'm not angry. I'm not jealous.
Thriving and everything like that.
Get married already. Anyways, so when did you get your first house?
I was 24 years old, I believe. It was maybe a little bit before my 24th birthday.
Okay.
And I bought, it was actually a pre-construction. And that was a way for me to get into the housing market a little easier, right? Because if you don't have the down payment saved like right off the bat, they'll allow you to actually get into it a little slower and have some time to build up that equity or to build up your down payment in order to.
Okay. So you're thinking this question, so I'm going to ask it. At the time, how much was this house and where's the house?
Yeah, so my first home was actually in Montreal. So I was born and raised outside of Montreal, and I bought.
He's an immigrant. He's an immigrant. Just born and raised outside of Montreal.
I don't know why I said born, but I was raised outside Montreal. So I got to Canada when I was about 9 years old. So I grew up outside of Montreal, and I bought the home in Montreal. That was the first home I bought. And the Montreal housing market was, at the time at least, a little more conducive to to young professionals trying to get into the housing market. Okay. I believe I bought a condo for around $200,000, plus or minus, but around that price range.
Right now, like a condo in Toronto, like 1-2 bed is like how much again?
Yeah, 1 to 2 bedrooms, you're probably looking at least like $400,000 to $500,000.
Yeah,
on the low end.
Yeah,
right?
on the low end.
Like
yeah.
If you're on the outskirts of the city, but if you're downtown, you know, you can forget about those prices.
It's like, forget about it. Okay, so what did you need to actually get your first house? Because you said down payment. How much percentage of the home was it, and like what was your process like?
Yeah, so when you start, the biggest thing I would say is really getting your credit in check and making sure that you're pre-approved in order to buy a home. That's more if you're looking at buying something that's already there, an old home. But when it comes to buying a pre-construction, you can actually just buy the home and reserve it without having the mortgage approval. But you're going to need to get approved for a mortgage when you actually get into the home. At the time, I decided to put 5% down, and my logic behind that was like, I prefer to get into the housing market now and allow my property to grow, even though I'm gonna have to pay. So when you put less than 20% down, you have to pay what's called private mortgage insurance. Okay. You essentially have to insure your mortgage and insure to the bank that you're you're going to pay it back. But one thing that's also really great is that if you attain 20% of the equity in your home, you can refinance the home and get rid of the private mortgage insurance. So one thing that happened to me is that since the housing market has been a boom in the last few years, I was actually able to refinance the home, have 20% of equity in the home, get rid of the private mortgage insurance, and now I get a really good amount of cash flow out of the property. So it's pretty exciting. It's a little bit of understanding, and it may sound technical, but we can dive a little bit more into
We
this.
have to. And I was actually going to do this where I was like, oh, I'll tell you a little bit more about Juju's background like later on. But he is writing like refinancing equity. And I'm like, and you're probably thinking, wait. So let's pull it back a little bit.
Yeah, let's do that. Because
So-
sometimes I get into it and I'm like, oh yeah, that's just easy.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about like all that terminology you used. So we'll talk, and I promise you get to know why he's the way he is. But it's you said you got pre-construction. It's easier to get into the housing market. What do you mean by that? Like you have to put 5% down, but was it all at once, or how did it work?
Yeah, so it depends on the project. So different projects are going to have different expectations out of you. So in that project specifically, they asked for a $5,000 deposit the day I reserved my place, and then the down payment was essentially $10,000. So the rest of that, it was closer to 11, but essentially the other $6,000 you get a couple months. So mine was 3 months later I had to give another $3,000, and then another 3 months later I had to get the last $3,000. Some of these projects are going to say, well, we want 10% over the course of the year. Others are going to say we want 20% over the course of the year. But at least the great thing about that is that you're buying a home at the value it's worth today. So let's say I buy a pre-construction and you tell me, well, it's going to be ready in 2 years, but you're buying it at the value it is today. So even though you're putting your money in slowly and getting to that 20% slowly, the day you actually move into the place, the home has probably increased in value already from the time you bought it, because you even though you haven't had the home and you haven't lived in it,
you still kind of had it.
Exactly. It was still yours. You're buying it at the value it was worth back then. So that's the great part. So that, depending on the project, it's going to be different, but essentially anywhere from 5 to 20% over the course of a certain period of time.
So 5 to 20% of down payment over the course of time, depending on how long the project is. And so this property you got, was it a condo, a townhouse, or?
Yeah, so the first property I got was a condo.
Okay.
And yeah, like I said, one thing that you're going to hear a lot is like, okay, don't buy pre-construction, only buy this, don't buy condos, only buy freehold. You got to do what's right for you and understand the pros and cons of everything. I think that there's pros and cons to everything, right? Like a condo is a little bit cheaper, but for myself, it's worked out for me because I've still made a solid amount of money because the price of the home has changed. But
I hear solid. I'm like, what you thinking?
No, but like essentially that's what's going to happen, and a lot of people are going to discourage you. And definitely, if I would have bought a freehold at the time, maybe I would have made even more than I made in this time. But at the time, I couldn't afford a freehold, right? So it was an opportunity to get into the housing market, and I made what I was able to make, and you kind of build up from that. So just understand the pros and cons of all of it, and work towards your goals.
Another big buzzword you use when you're explaining that journey is being able to refinance an equity in a house. What does equity on a house mean?
Yeah, the equity that you own in the home is essentially the difference between what you owe and the value of the home. So if your home is worth $200,000 or $250,000, let's say, but you owe $200,000 on the home, well, the equity is that extra $50,000. So that's what gives you leverage in different situations. So when you get to the point where, let's say your home is worth $300,000, well, the bank is going to want you to keep 20% of your equity in the home, but you can actually go to the bank and tell them, well, I would like to refinance the home, keep 20% in the home, get out another mortgage essentially.
Okay.
But that 80% now, you have a little bit more. So you would get a mortgage, for the 80%, and then the extra cash that's remaining, you can actually take that out, and the bank will give you a cash-free check for that extra amount of money.
Let me try to understand this. It's, say I get a house today in 2021.
Yeah.
And it cost me $500. And then in 2023, this house is worth $700. So the equity, and maybe I didn't pay Jack, maybe I paid $100 in the house, okay? So what's left for me to pay to my mortgage, obviously erasing interest like it doesn't exist or anything like that, is $400. And because it's worth 700 in 2023, you're saying that my equity now is 300.
Exactly.
And you're saying I can go to the bank and say, this house is worth 700 now. I only owe 400. So can you give me some cash? And the bank is going to say, no, you got to keep 20% of that 300 in the house.
Yep.
And then the remaining piece I can give you as a check for another mortgage.
No, exactly. That's correct. So the rest of it, you can take it out and you can then leverage it.
Okay.
And that's how people really go about, buying home and buying multiple homes. They just take money out of one home, they put it on the next one, and they continue buying homes in that way. Or they use that refinance in order to do renovations. When you do renovations in a home, is actually a great way to get equity because you can invest $20,000 into a home, and it's not always that easy, but you can invest $20,000 in renovation, and the home value is going to go up at $40,000 or $50,000.
Yeah.
Like almost from one day.
So is it possible to like refinance and still be in the home?
Yeah. No, so the refinance is the part where you're refinancing is you're still living in the home. Otherwise, you would just sell the home, right, and take out the profit, pay back the mortgage, and then you have the cash. But refinancing is when you're actually in the home. I think a better example would be, so let's say you bought the home for $200,000, and now you've paid $20,000 off of that home. So now you owe to the bank $180,000.
Yes.
Now you go to the bank, and the home is now worth $250,000. Now, 20% of that $250,000 would be $50,000. So the bank is going to make sure that at least $50,000 needs to remain as part of the equity in the home. Outside of that, they're going to give you another mortgage for $200,000.
Gotcha.
But that also means that there's this $20,000 because you only owe the bank $180,000, right? But now you're taking out a mortgage for $200,000. So that $20,000, the bank's just going to write you a check and hand it to you, and you can now use that $20,000, put it on the next home, and buy another home with that.
Awesome. So is that how you were able to get the second one in Montreal as well?
Yeah. So the second one. So actually, when I refinanced, I didn't get too much money out of the home. And the second one, and that's something that I really encourage people to do, especially young people, is partnering with others. So what I did is I worked with a couple of my friends. They decided they wanted to do a flip. They came across an opportunity, and we got together, 4 of us, and we purchased the home and got together and did all the renovations. So it alleviates a little bit of the cost of the renovations, cost of the down payment. If you're going to do a flip, usually the bank is going to want you to put 20% down unless you can prove that you're going to occupy the home. But that's harder to prove when you're looking at some short-term rentals, that it has to do with the
and there's
the
multiple
listing.
people
Exactly.
on the title.
So the down payment for that one wasn't too much for me because it was with other people. But at the same time, that's the way to do it. But I didn't get too much money out of the home in order to do that. I was just I'm someone that I'm very diligent about my money, and I'm guessing we're going to speak about that as well. But I saved for that second home as well.
Okay. And then the third one, did you, because I guess my question is there not a limit on how many mortgages you can have in your name?
No, there's no limits on how many mortgages you can have. The only thing is, like, unless it's owner occupied, if it's an investment property, the bank is going to want you to put 20% down because you're going to have to get a private mortgage. So otherwise, normally walking into CIBC or whatever bank you bank with and saying, hey, I want a mortgage, I want to get approved for a mortgage, you can only do that if you're actually going to live in the home. Outside of that, when you look at investments, it is a little bit more risky, so it is a little riskier. So the bank is going to want to ensure that you're someone that actually can afford. So putting 5% down, putting 10% down, and things of that nature, you can only do that if you can show that you're actually buying the home in order to live in it. So whenever you go into investment properties, and they're going to want you to prove that. So they get really into all of your business when you.
They'll be like, where do you live right now?
Exactly. Okay. So they'll look into all of that, like, where do you live? Why do you work at this address, but you want to live here? So they'll be very, very intrusive. So you're going to actually, but if you're going to put 20% down, there's no issue. A private lender is just going to say, yep, you're just looking to invest. You have the 20%, you're good to go. But outside of that, there's no limits of how many. There's people out there that own, 60, 100 properties and continue cash flowing from that. Wow.
So there you have it. He has 3 homes. We found out how he's done at least. So now my question is, how did you, because your third property, you're looking to flip it, right? Like, so you got it to invest in it. So that means you needed 20% down.
That's correct.
So how are you, because like where I'm from, like you were like, yo, he be doing some internet business. So how were you able to save all this money for down payment for 3 mortgages in 2 years?
Yeah, so some money now, when I did this flip, so I'm not completely out of it right now. We're in the closing stage of the flip, but that will give me a solid amount of cash. And like I said, I've always been very diligent about my money. All the money that I have, I always reinvested in either myself or different business ventures or things that I think that are going to profit for me. So I was very lucky, and I also leverage a lot of other people's money in order to make money. So I speak about
what you mean?
So no, that's actually a great question. So a lot of times people see debt as this really, really bad thing.
I do. Like I don't stay away from the debt.
So I actually speak about this on my podcast, and I have an episode coming really soon about this.
What's your podcast called?
So my podcast is called 1% of Juju. I'm gonna send Janey the links.
You're gonna put what? It's my YouTube.
Yeah, exactly.
I will put the link.
No. I will personally put the links. But you guys can follow. I give a lot of tips on Instagram as well. My Instagram it's Juju with 5 views. But yeah, no, I try to share as much knowledge as I can. But one thing I did last year is when I bought my home, I needed furniture, right? So, but I had the cash to actually buy the furniture. But what I decided to do is my credit card company, they said, hey, you can get this furniture, you'll get this cash back, and actually for a certain amount of time, for I think it was 3 years, there's going to be 0 interest.
Whoa!
Now people don't like that, right? And
no, wait, how is a credit card company giving you 0 interest on some type of cash? What kind of credit card is that?
Yeah, so it was the store, the store credit card.
Makes sense.
But the problem with a lot of these, so the way the credit card companies make the money is they assume that you're not going to pay it back, and then once that 3 years is up, the interest is through the roof. So they'll charge you 2 to 3 times the interest they would normally charge you in order. So, but if you're smart and you leverage those things, you can actually really take advantage of those things. So that's just one example. And what I did is I took that money, and then the stock market crashed, and I was like, well, this is such a great opportunity. All these stocks are trading at a discount, and I was thinking, well, I'm going to slowly pay the credit card off in the next 3 years. But when I started investing money in the stock market, and this is not to say just go take money from a credit card and
we talked about credit cards. Listen, if you're a newcomer, please watch that video on credit cards first.
You want to be very diligent and be very mindful. There's a lot of loopholes that you can take advantage of, but at the same time, you got to be educated in it. So the default, I would say, the default would be to not use credit cards as crazy as possible. But if you're able to leverage it, it can be amazing for you. And what I did, so I invested in the stock market, and I was lucky enough. I really call it luck because there's no skill in there. It was just great timing and everything, where I was able to get 100%.
No, you're not lucky, you're blessed.
And I was able to get 100% return on my investment. So I took my investment out of the stock market, paid the credit card off, but now I had an extra 10K to work with. So there's a lot of these avenues, right? So if I'm gonna pay 3% of interest somewhere, but at the same time I can make 7 to 8%, I'm winning overall. So that's what I often do is I leverage other people's money, whether it's the bank or borrow from someone, and tell them like, hey, listen, if you can lend me $10,000, I'll give you, $1,100 back, but I know that I'll go out and I'll make, or 11,000, sorry, but I know that I'll go out and make 15,000. That 4,000 is not extra in his mind. So that's what I do a lot is I leverage other people's money, usually not friends and family. You can do that as well, but the bank, and there's a lot of different avenues.
There's free money out there.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess the question then is, because he's very like risk appreciative. I'm very risk averse. Like, you will not catch a 1% interest on any debt or credit card anywhere in my life. But he's like, I'll take debt because sometimes it's good debt. Yeah. So I guess what's the balance for somebody who is like starting out? So I guess the question is, say I want to get a house today. I'm a young person. I probably need to Canada. Like, what are my steps? Like, what's the first thing to do?
Yeah, I would say definitely get to the point where you can work on your credit. That would be step number 1. Make sure you have a good credit.
What is good credit? Like, for you to get approved, what credit level did you need to get to? Like, numbers. Sorry, I'm all about like practical.
So actually, that's the funny thing that like I actually don't know what you need in order to get an approval, like what credit score. But if you're about like you want to be, keep an eye on your credit. Whatever it says good, you're probably fine, right? So
okay, so you can use things like Credit Karma,
exactly.
like just to check. Yeah.
So make sure that you're just in good standings. Pay all your bills on time, things like that, because those are things that long term they're going to screw you over. Because if you get a higher interest rate, you end up paying so much more on your mortgage, then it's not worth it.
You don't even really make
exactly.
money.
So make sure that you continuously working on your credit, and then go work with a mortgage person and get pre-approved. Because sometimes a lot of people are very afraid because they have no idea what they can even get approved for. How do I get into the game?
And some people think, oh, I need to have 5% of whatever properties are out there before I even talk to a mortgage person.
Yeah, no, not at all. You can go to a mortgage person and say like, hey, listen, I'm saving this amount every month, meaning that by the end of the year, I'll have this amount saved up. So go work with that mortgage person. They're going to tell you, okay, well, you're going to have this amount of down payment that you're working towards. Based on that, based on your income and things like that, you can afford this amount of house. So
gotcha.
That would be step number one, in my opinion. Or you can go the pre-construction route and you don't need to do anything. You just need, they're going to
call
tell
a
you.
realtor.
Yeah, you just call whoever's on that project right now, and you call them and they'll tell you, okay, well, if you want to get in it today, you just give us the $5,000 deposit.
And you don't need a pre-approval for that.
You don't need a pre-approval, and then every month or 3 months or 6 months,
whatever
you pay the next patient. They're going to tell you the terms, right? Everything is upfront. They're going to tell you, well, here you need to pay 5%.
Then
so
10,
this
things like that.
by this date, and then you look at your numbers and you're like, okay, I can afford this. And you just go ahead and do that.
So knowing all you know now and what you've been through, say you are trying to get your first house around like Ontario, because that's like currently where we are today. What would be your advice? Pre-construction or again, given the market we're currently in, and if you haven't heard, it's not the greatest. So like pre-construction or like ready to move in, buying a house that needs work or a ready furnished house. Like, what would you advise somebody who's just like thinking about getting a house right now?
Yeah, so when you're buying a house that needs work, I would say like you want to like have some kind of knowledge about real estate and things like that, because a lot of people go into things and they're like, well, I'm going to go into this terrible neighborhood and renovate this house and make it beautiful, but then you're still in a really bad neighborhood, so people that want a really nice house aren't necessarily moving there. So I would definitely get into the game a little slower. Fixer-uppers are still not a bad idea, especially if you're new to the game, but you want to get something that doesn't need too much work. There's no one specific advice. Everything depends on your situation, right? Like I always tell people, look at the pros and cons of everything. That's the biggest advice that I give to people all the time. That's why I saw on my podcast, there's no one advice that you can follow.
Right.
There's pros and cons to everything. The freeholds, the new ones, and even in this market, you know, in some instances, it might be smart to still maybe outbid someone on a home that's a little above what you would normally pay, because the market is going to continue going up, and you save yourselves the headache of actually having to renovate and things like that. So it depends where you are, what you want, what you're looking for out of the home. So there's no one specific advice. I've literally done all of it, right? I've bought homes that are ready to move in. I've bought homes that are, you know, that need some work, and I've bought a pre-construction. So like I said, like I'm kind of coming from the place where I don't think that there's a specific negative for any of them.
Totally makes sense. Okay, so who should I be talking to first? A mortgage person or a realtor? To get my pros and cons.
Yeah, honestly, I would say that the mortgage person is probably like a good person to speak to first, just because they'll give you the different options. Because the mortgage person, if you're buying a pre-construction, realistically, you're not going to work with the mortgage person for a whole year.
Long time,
once you decide what route you want to go, if it's better for you to buy pre-construction or if it's better for you to buy, because you'll probably still have an idea of what you're looking for, of what you want, based on, okay, well, these homes are really, really expensive. Okay, maybe it's not the best idea for me to buy a home outright right now.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about like your background and like why this comes so like almost, or why it seems like it comes almost second nature to you.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I grew up in Montreal. So I grew up in Montreal and grew up in very modest environment, so we didn't have much growing up. So when I went to school, one thing I wanted to do, I studied finance in university, and then I decided to become a financial advisor right out of school. And the reason for that is because I really wanted to help people that come from a background like myself. A lot of the things that I just didn't know, right? Especially for us as Black people, like it's not something that's taught, like we don't talk about it enough. It's not something that's praised, like financial literacy and things of that nature. So I just wanted to educate people on how is it that some of these people, they continuously get richer and richer and richer, and what are the loopholes. It's not even loopholes for myself, legal things are accessible to everyone that we can all do and find out about. So that's really what I wanted to do. And
it depends on, there's some legal things that you have to have a certain pay grade to find out about, but yeah, awesome. And also, just in case you didn't know, he used to be a pro football player, so you can come through me and I'll plug you.
She said come through me. But yeah, no, so I played sports, I played football, and that gave me that competitive drive. But continuously, I always my goal is really to educate people on some of these things that seem very complicated, but try to dumb it down to a level that people can actually understand and take advantage of. Because there's a lot of things that are out there, not everything like you mentioned, but there's a lot of things that are out there for the average person that we're just not aware of, and we just don't know how to take advantage of.
Totally makes sense. So you're here right now, and I'm thinking, okay, boy, he has 3 houses, he's wearing like some nice gold chain, he look fly, and I'm thinking he probably lives in a castle. Tell us the truth about your living situation now versus what people would think when they see you hear what you actually even do for a day job, because he actually makes bank. Like he said, it was solid, remember? So tell us about your living situation and how you had to keep your expenses in order to be able to make all the savings and investments.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because from myself, I think that I derive a lot more joy out of financial independence and out of financial freedom instead of just immediate pleasures or things like that. So Janey has been to my house. I live in a very modest, I live in someone's basement. Literally, I have 3 homes, but I don't live in any of them because the mortgage would be more expensive than what I'm paying for.
What's your rent like, actually? Tell the people.
No, if I told you, I'd have to take this channel down. But no,
it's low.
It's very low, and the reason I live like that is because I want to set myself up for the future. I have bigger goals and bigger things in mind. So I live in a very modest lifestyle, and I don't buy a lot of flashy things. Sometimes I tell a lot of people I'm very good at figuring out the hacks of life and taking advantage of. A lot of people see me travel a lot. I haven't paid for a trip in forever, right? And I speak about a lot of those things as well, and I want you guys to find out those hacks as well, right? Like knowing how to credit card hack and knowing how to take advantage instead of letting the credit card companies take advantage of
you. I love that. I think that's a good note to end. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. That was helpful. I hope you have your marching orders and how he did it. I'm obviously in awe of you. You know how much I hold you in high esteem, and thank you for sharing the gist about how we too can get 3 houses one day. Thank you for coming again.
No worries. Pleasure for me.
You're welcome. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and remember to share and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a blessed week. Bye.